So let's wait for the stream to fire up all across the fruited plain of the internet before we get into business on the day. Of course, it's a very beautiful Monday. We hope you had an amazing weekend. And is the stream working? I think it is. That means we can go ahead and get started. So let's do it, shall we? Hello, my friends, and welcome back to yet another episode of Watching the Watchers Live, the show that spotlights misconduct involving police, prosecutors, and politicians. My name is Robert Gouveia. I'm a criminal defense attorney, and today we're talking about the Donald Trump expungement outrage. We've got a bunch of lefties out there who are freaked out that Donald Trump's impeachments might be going away. And could you imagine if that came to fruition? They spent a lot of time and a lot of political capital, and they really love that label that Donald Trump has been impeached. But if there is an expungement of the impeachment, well, they're not going to be able to talk about that anymore. And so we'll go through some of those clips. I want to share with you two House resolutions that are working their way through Congress, one by Elise Stefanik and another one by Marjorie Taylor Greene. Both were submitted. And Kevin McCarthy is kind of hinting like he might be playing around with this thing. And of course, we're asking ourselves, what does expungement mean? Does it matter? Is it constitutionally significant or whatever? But it doesn't really matter. You know, this is kind of the situation that we're in right now. Is just people just do things, and it doesn't matter if it's true or not. It's whether it's constitutional or not. Student loans, is valid or invalid, doesn't really matter. They just do it. So in this case, if they did expunge it for Trump, should be interesting because then he'll say, I was officially expunged. And that wouldn't bode well for them. So they're all flipped out about it. Nancy Pelosi, Stinky Eric Swalwell, and the censured, that guy, that loser who got censured, Adam Schiff. You know, he got censured, if you forgot about that. Yeah, I mean, he's like one of three people in American history. Unbelievably pathetic. So anyways, he got censured. He's all upset about it. So we'll go through all of that. Then I want to share with you what Mike Pence has been up to, because we heard a very interesting buzzword from him today, which was the word reckless. And when we are talking about Donald Trump and the January 6 charges, a big missing component of this, the keystone, the missing piece of the puzzle, is about the mens rea and about whether they can show that Donald Trump had the intent to go and insurrect America, or whether this was something that he legitimately believed was a legal exercise of his power, or was it the opposite? And so we heard Mike Pence on with CNN use this legal buzzword, and we're going to take a look at the Justice Department manual, which says that the word reckless can really be interpreted into the word knowingly, which of course is exactly what Jack Smith needs in order to bring charges, because it would hit the mens rea, the mental state, the guilty mind. So now we'll go through that. We've also got a question about whether Mark Meadows has flipped. We had rumors about this a couple weeks ago. There's a new story, a new leak about that will hit. And then we've got Jen Psaki and another former prosecutor that are going to be talking and hemming and hawing about when these charges might come, and really whether Donald Trump's current classified documents case, whether that's going to actually take place in May of 2024, or whether that will be postponed. So we'll get some updates on the Trump stuff in a couple of different areas before we turn our attention to what's going on with the Biden crime families, because we have a new story that apparently Joe Biden was on something like 24 different phone calls with Hunter Biden's business partners. 24 over 24 is what they said the numbers were. And those are pretty big numbers. And those don't jibe with what Joe Biden has told us his relationship was. And so I went around, dug up, I've got 4 or 5 different clips of Joe Biden saying, never spoke with Hunter. We kept arm's length distance this entire time. I didn't talk to my kids about any of this stuff because he doesn't want to be involved in a conflict of interest. And so we'll go through that. Now, Karine came out, and I want to, man, this was a wild one today. Wasn't really expecting this, but it hit hard when you see it. We're going to go and play 4 or 5 different clips of Joe Biden. Then I want to show you the language and how it shifted today. It goes from, I never even spoke to my son, to now the new language, old and busted, new and in, is, I never was in business. Oh, never was in business. Huh. Well, that's a little bit different than never spoken to. And so what is the next layer? We don't know. I never snorted the coke in my left nostril, only my right. All right, so we can't wait for that one. Now, there's been a big question about this guy, Devon Archer, Biden family business associate. Apparently, he's canceled his deposition with Congress a couple different times. They sent him a subpoena, and he was not showing up. But apparently, he will be showing up next week, 1 week from today, Monday, July 31st. And when he shows up there, he's going to be telling us about those phone calls, evidently. So we'll get into that. And what's funny is that Hunter Biden is also now filing an ethical complaint against Marjorie Taylor Greene because she showed his pee-pee tape in Congress. Oh, man. And we didn't play that here because it was, gross. Hunter. Oh, man. So he was all over the screen, and she brought it out in Congress. Now, this was one of the documents showing the transactions, the emails, and all of the other things. But Hunter's little dingle was hanging all over on YouTube and Twitter last week. And so now Hunter's like, I'm offended. And so he sent over an ethical complaint against Marjorie Taylor Greene. This guy, man, the bravado of this guy. Well, he is basically running the country, so why the hell not? All right, and then we've got our final segment, which is where we'll go through and check in with this. This was a fun interview, and I haven't listened to the full thing yet. I listened to the first, 3 minutes, and I said, oh, we're jipping that one. But this is IRS whistleblower. His name's Joseph Ziegler. We heard from him. He testified in front of Congress and gave some really compelling testimony. But, man, he went into the lion's den. He showed up right on CNN and talked to Jake Tapper about this. And Jake Tapper started to go after him a little bit at the outset of the interview. He's like, well, that's not what the thing said. And he said, yeah, it is, Jake. And he said, it's important I come here on CNN to tell your audience of, them the truth here so that they can understand what is actually going on and break past the filter. So very cool stuff from Joseph Ziegler. We'll go through. We'll watch that. We've also got Jim Jordan, who is explaining where they're at in the Biden investigation, saying that David Weiss is key, and they're getting closer to the end game phase of this whole ordeal. And then, of course, we'll wrap it up with Byron Donalds, who explains that the FBI knew about it and they all worked together to cover it up. FBI, IRS, and the DOJ, one right after another, all, some might say, colluding against America. And so, my friends, we've got a lot to get to today. And you can see this morning for our members, we had an interesting conversation about FISA. Insane opinion that came out, which really makes you, the opinion revealed that the FBI was spying on sitting United States senators, okay, searching for them by their last name, and searching for judges and other elected people by their social security numbers and things like that. The FBI just like, senator, U.S. senator. I don't know, who could it be? I don't know, Ted Cruz? Could it be, I don't know, Ron Johnson? I don't know, could it be Chuck Grassley? Any one of these senators, they're just poking around, searching these databases that gobble up everything. It's an outraging opinion. We talked about it this morning. The video will be out later. But is anything going to happen? No, of course not. Even the people who are involved in the abuse, if you read through the opinion, they're not named. We don't know what the ramifications were. It's just sort of like, well, hey guys, follow the law the next time and everything will work out. It's just, one thing after another. So anyways, shout out to our members. Thank you for everybody who supports us by becoming a member on Locals or on YouTube. We're very grateful for your support. And if you want to join us, great way to do that is going over to watchingthewatchers.locals.com, or you can check out our new website, robertgovea.com. It's got all the links over to Locals. You can sign up for our newsletter. You can get the daily segment reports on our website. So if you don't want to watch a full video, they are in articles as well, so you can read about the video. If you sign up for the newsletter, there's a full tutorial on how to use the mind map. It's all free, and you get a daily summary of what we're doing here, so you never miss anything. And if we get canceled, if YouTube decides, hey, you guys are gone for the day, or gone for the month, or gone forever, then at least we're in touch, and I really think this is going to become a much bigger concern as we get closer to the election. So I appreciate you signing up for our newsletter, robertgovea.com. We're trying to add a bunch of additional features to the website. and we love that you're over there. But it's a great place to join, watchingthewatchers.locals.com. We do member-only morning streams. Also, our friends on YouTube join us, and we have a private members-only Telegram chat where the fun never ends, my friends. Now, before we get into the meat and potatoes of the day, let's make sure we're healthy and properly nutrified and fortified, courtesy of our friends at fieldofgreens.com, because we all would like to lose some of those leftover pounds, but how sick are you for all the ads for weight loss pills and fad diets? You know, we've all been there. We've all done that. And they just don't work. But you know what does? Eating 5 healthy servings of fruits and vegetables every day. You do that, weight would probably just fall right off. But look, vegetables, I know, not a fan. And fruit, who's got time to prepare that every day? I don't. We've got shows to do, baby. Instead, we can focus on Field of Greens. Now, Field of Greens is a science-backed formula. Very specific fruits and vegetables that you're not going to find in any other product. Proper nutrition reboots your metabolism so you burn calories faster and lose weight a healthier way. And Field of Greens is the only brand backed by a better health promise. Yes, you'll look and you'll feel healthier fast, but the greater proof is going to come at your next checkup. When you walk into your doctor's office and he says, "Whoa! You have lost weight." I'm shocked. Whatever you're doing, keep it up. You look fabulous. Don't even need to see you. Head on out of here. Don't even worry about your copay. That's how good you look. Let's get you started with 15% off your first order. Go on over to fieldofgreens.com. Enter code Robert when you check out so you can save 15% off when you have your loaded up cart. Field of Greens, and make sure you remember that the vegetables, they want to be eaten, okay? They do. They pop out of the ground. They're bursting with happiness. And so make sure you get yours at fieldofgreens.com. All right. Now, let's get into it. Jack Smith marches forward with his January 6th inquiry into Donald Trump. We're waiting for an indictment any day now. And there's questions about who his key witnesses are. Who is going to be joining the government's prosecution, either directly as a star witness who's going to voluntarily show up, or as a reluctant witness, somebody who just is like, well, I have to go through the motions here and I'm going to be honest. But secretly, they would also like to have that person taken out because it would clear the path for them in their pursuit of the presidency. Who could we be talking about? Mike Pence, of course, this fellow right here. Big questions now about whether he has given Jack Smith, the special counsel, exactly what he wants. We've got other questions about guys like Mark Meadows and whether the DOJ has put pressure on these people to cause them to flip. Now, in this segment, we're going to talk about this concept of recklessness, and it ties to a very key legal element called a mens rea, a mental state. And when we hear this word reckless, a lot of defense attorneys out there are going to be screaming bingo, because that's exactly the phrase that is going to fill the gap of a missing mens rea that's going to enable the prosecution of Trump. Let's see what Mike Pence said before we jump into the actual analysis from the Department of Justice and their manual. Here was what Mike Pence said on CNN.
Joining me now is GOP candidate and former Vice President Mike Pence. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. I want to start by asking about...
Thank you, Dana. Good to be on.
Thank you. About your former boss. He is facing a potential third indictment over his efforts to overturn the 2020 election. You said, you quote, hope it doesn't come to that, and the American people should decide his future at the ballot box. But I just want to be clear. If the Justice Department has evidence that he committed a crime related to January 6th, you do not think he should be charged?
All right, Mike, you're up.
Well, look, I know I did my duty that day under the Constitution. There. And frankly, as we traveled across New Hampshire this week to 10 events in communities across the state, I was deeply moved at how many people expressed their appreciation to me for the stand that we took for the Constitution. Yeah, and I've said many times,
we've heard this, many times.
The president's words were reckless that day. I had no right to overturn the election.
Bingo!
While his words were reckless, based on what I know, I'm not yet convinced that they were criminal. I mean, I obviously wasn't there for every meeting. I was busy trying to help reopen the government and the country after the COVID pandemic. I was spending a fair amount of time in Georgia, Dana, as you remember, in those special elections.
Don't know what Trump was
doing. But from what I know, I really do hope it doesn't come to that, and also for the reason that I do.
I'm sure you hope it doesn't come to that. Now, we're going to come back to Mike Pence, but let's put a pause on that. We got a lot more to go, but you heard the word reckless twice. And then you heard Mike Pence say, but I don't really know. I don't really know what he did or what was happening here. But let's go over to the Justice Department manual and see what they say about the word reckless. Now, this you'll see is from the DOJ website, and they've got a manual called the Criminal Resource Manual, where there's all sorts of rules and regulations, and their prosecutors go here, defense attorneys go here. Everybody looks it up. They say, how do you handle this type of case? Or how do you handle this type of case? And so on. Now, you see here that different provisions of the U.S. Code, in particular the conspiracy section, we ask ourselves about what's called a mens rea, a mental state. So in most criminal cases, you have two components that are necessary in order to bring criminal charges. You've got to have a statute that's violated. Within that statute, it's got all the different elements of the law. And typically you'll see stuff in there that says you can't, make physical contact with somebody that causes injury, right? That's the physical thing that happened. That's the action. But that's only one part. You've also got to have the mental state, the mindset. What was going on in the person's mind? Did they intentionally swing to take that action? Or was this an accident? Did the person not swing at all? Did they knowingly do it? Were they acting recklessly? And then you combine those two, a guilty mind plus an illegal action, 1 + 1 = 2, mens rea plus actus reus equals a criminal charge. So in the Trump saga, we've been asking ourselves, wait a minute, is there evidence here that Donald Trump was acting knowingly and willfully insurrecting America? Are you kidding me right now? You're telling me that Donald Trump was knowingly conspiring to steal an election? Now, I know that a lot of people on MSNBC think that, but we got to see that in evidence. I know they wake up every day frothing all over the place, hyperventilating about it, but we need to see some evidence, and they've got to prove this. So is it knowingly? Did Trump knowingly act, or did he willfully act? Let's take a look. They say, as used in the statute, the term knowingly, so did Donald Trump knowingly insurrect? Did he know the election was lawful? It says it requires only that the defendant acted with knowledge of the falsity. So if they're saying the election was legal, Trump is saying it's not legal. He knew that that was false. Therefore, it was a knowing mental state. And so we say that's kind of a hard thing to get to. Did he know it? I don't think we've seen any evidence of that. Now, we haven't seen the indictment yet, but we'll see. Now, willfully is another term. Means no more than the forbidden act was done deliberately and with knowledge, and it doesn't require proof of evil intent. An act is done willfully if it's done voluntarily and intentionally, that is doing something that the law forbids. And again, this is the other component of this. Does the law forbid what Donald Trump did? I mean, they tightened up the Electoral Count Act. They've modified some of the procedures. And we've got some precedent that I think you can make the argument that in prior elections, when there are contested votes, that things go back. There are other different things that happen. Not every election runs exactly how they wanted it to this time. Doesn't mean it was illegal. Now, you see both of those terms, willful and knowingly, but we still haven't seen recklessness yet, except right here. Tucked away within the subsection of knowingly is this recklessness. Proof, so insert Donald Trump here. Proof that Donald Trump acted with reckless disregard or reckless indifference may satisfy the knowledge requirement, okay? So in other words, the government is not going to need to prove, I think that they're going to make an argument like this, that Trump had the specific intent to overthrow the country, because that's going to be a hard thing to prove. Trump says, I know I lost, steal it anyways, go, bring the helicopter, and Clavicle Girl is stopping Trump from seizing the Secret Service vehicle, right? All of that. But they're not going to be able to get that evidence. So the language that we're going to see differently, and this is going to be a big pivot shift. I mean, we're already starting to see this bubble up, but this is where it's going. It's about reckless disregard. Or look at this, reckless indifference. It may satisfy the knowledge requirement. So this is the Liz Cheney conversation. Oh, Donald Trump was just sitting in the Oval Office. He was eating Cheerios and watching the daily news, whatever. And you go, what did you want him to do? Like parachute into the Capitol building or something? Weirdos. He doesn't have to go out there and do cartwheels like Liz Cheney mandates because it is his office, not hers. That's executive discretion. But what they're going to do is they're going to say, when the defendant makes a false material statement and consciously avoids learning the facts or intends to deceive the government, that constitutes recklessness, and the recklessness is going to constitute knowingly, and that's going to be the guilty mind, all right? And the question is, who is helping with that narrative? And Mike Pence, you just heard him say the word reckless twice. Donald Trump was reckless. He wasn't knowingly insurrecting, but by disregarding all of the other, experts telling him everywhere, that amounts to recklessness, and he was doing it to avoid learning the facts. He didn't want to accept reality. And this is where this is going, my friends. And so this is Mike Pence, and I think they're bringing up the different pawns on the chessboard to line them up. That's why we're starting to see this narrative shift. So let's go back to Mike Pence. We'll hear him say it one more time, and we'll play through the interview.
Across New Hampshire this week to 10 events in communities across the state. I was deeply moved at how many people expressed their appreciation to me for the stand that we took for the Constitution. And I've said many times that the president's words were reckless that day. I had no right to overturn the election. But while his words were reckless, based on what I know, I'm not yet convinced that they were criminal. I mean, I obviously wasn't there for every meeting. I was busy trying to help reopen the government and the country after the COVID pandemic. I was spending a fair amount of time in Georgia, Dana, as you remember, in those special elections. But from what I know, I really do hope it doesn't come to that, and also for the reason that I do think the Department of Justice has lost the confidence of the American people. I mean, in one town hall after another across New Hampshire, I heard a deep concern for a perception about the unequal treatment of the law. And I think one more indictment against the former president will only contribute to that sense among the American people. And as I said, I'd rather that these issues and the judgment about his conduct on January 6th be left to the American people in the upcoming primaries, and I'll leave it at that.
Well, we know that's not going to happen. We expect an indictment this week, any minute now, actually. And we know Mike Pence and others testified in the grand jury proceeding because special counsel shattered the privilege that existed previously. So Mike Pence, as Donald Trump's vice president, was previously shielded by executive privilege. He was not allowed to testify against Donald Trump until they shattered that privilege in the D.C. courts. Now we've got questions about what they extracted out of the D.C. courts in order to use in the indictment in Florida, and whether a Florida judge would have allowed those same investigatory tactics to have been done in Florida. Answer, probably no. And so an indictment's coming up any minute now, and we don't really know what Mike Pence said, or what Mark Meadows said, or what Trump's lawyer, who also had his privilege breached, Evan Corcoran, said.
Well, part of the reason why people believe that the Justice Department is not being fair is because your former boss is telling them that's the case. I just want to...
Yeah, in addition to the long record of their abuses, they're the ones who did Crossfire Hurricane. They're the ones who lied to us after January 6th, after many different ordeals, including the documents and the 51 so-called intelligence experts with the laptop. There has been dishonesty from all of the people in charge for a long time. Now we've got these whistleblowers who are blowing the whistle on the DOJ, IRS. Merrick Garland's lying to us. His story contradicts David Weiss. The list goes on and on and on. It's not just Donald Trump who is putting a couple truths out that's causing this backlash. It's all of America and the world seeing it. And now they're prosecuting their political enemy openly in front of all of the world to see. No wonder there's backlash.
To follow up and to say, you're right. I remember you were traveling a lot and you weren't in every meeting that he had. This is what the special counsel has been doing, gathering evidence. If that evidence does point to an actual crime, you still think that it's better for the country that he not be indicted and held accountable?
According to who? A crime according to the DOJ? The same DOJ that has been corrupted throughout this entire ordeal. And we've seen them make up stories and provide cover for Joe Biden at the expense of Donald Trump. Yeah, we don't trust their indictment. Yeah, their indictment is going to cause more of a fissure. They should let the people vote, but they know that that's not going to be good enough for them. In order to maintain power, they've got to eliminate the choice from the people, which has been their pattern for a long time. Whether it's on social media, you can't comment about the pandemic, you can't comment about election problems or about certain pharmaceutical drugs. You can't speak, and during the pandemic, you can't leave your home. And so now they don't want you to be able to vote for your president. They want him removed off ballots, urging secretaries of state at Nevada and other places to just take him off because he's an insurrectionist now. So no, Dana, no.
Well, look, it's not just what the former president has said about his situation. I mean, look, we had whistleblower testimony on Capitol Hill this week that, in all fairness, was largely ignored by much of the national media.
Well, no, we did that, but I just want to ask
IRS
about
agents
this.
that were talking about obstructions of investigations into the president's family, and then we learned about one instance after another of FBI officials saying that they were obstructed from asking questions. I'll be honest with you, as I traveled around New Hampshire, I heard again and again from people about a deep concern about unequal treatment of the law, and it's why I said to people, if I'm elected president of the United States, we're not just going to have a new attorney general, we're going to clean house among all the senior leadership at the Justice Department, and we're going to appoint men and women of integrity who will have the confidence of Americans across the political spectrum for their commitment to the rule of law.
Sir, and I hear what you're saying about that, and I'm sure you are hearing that on the campaign trail. But because you have a very unique perspective, because your life and the life of your family was at risk that day, which you have talked about very extensively. You still believe that the former president should be held to a different standard if what you experienced turned out to be based in breaking the law, and that is shown through evidence found by the special.
He should be held to the same standard that Hillary Clinton got held to, and that Joe Biden is currently being held to, but he's not.
Counsel's investigation?
Well, Dana, let me be very clear. President Trump was wrong on that day, and he's still wrong in asserting that I had the right to overturn the election. But what his intentions were, and as you know, criminal charges have everything to do with intent.
But you just said it was reckless.
State of mind was,
Sure.
And I don't honestly know what his intention was that day. Whether as he spoke to that crowd, as he tweeted during the riot itself. But for my part, from what I saw, as I've said, his actions were reckless. I believe that history will hold him accountable. I believe that Republican primary voters know that we need new leadership in this party. I know that some of the pundits and the pollsters think it's different out there, but I got to tell you, based on the enthusiasm and the support that we're seeing, not only across New Hampshire this week, but Iowa and states around the country, I'm absolutely convinced that we're going to have a new standard bearer in this party, and we're going to work every day to make sure it's us.
I just have one last question about this, because this is so personal to you. And when I say this, I'm talking about the potential for violence. Donald Trump said this week, talked about how his supporters might react if he is charged and faces potential jail time.
I think it's a very dangerous thing to even talk about, because we do have a tremendously passionate group of voters, much more passion than they had in 2020 and much more passion than they had in 2016. I think it would be very dangerous.
Does that kind of rhetoric worry you?
What did he say?
Well, it doesn't worry me because I have
Good.
More confidence in the American people and in the people
And
in
he
our
didn't say
movement.
anything also.
Look, it was one of the things that infuriated me on January 6th with what I saw, people ransacking the Capitol and engaging in violence against law enforcement officers. Dan, I just, I think I would say not just the majority, but virtually everyone in our movement are the kind of Americans who love this country, are patriotic, or are law and order people who would never have done anything like that there or anywhere else. So I have more confidence in the American people than that. I hear my former running mate's frustration in his voice, but I'm sure the American people will respond in our movement in a way that will express, as they have every right to, under the First Amendment, to express concerns that they have about what they perceive to be unequal treatment of the law. But I'm not concerned about it beyond that.
That's pretty remarkable that you're not concerned about it, given the fact that they wanted to hang you on January 6th. I want to move on to the issues that you were talking about.
Well, wait a minute. Wait a minute. I want to say to you, there's been an effort to take those that perpetrated violence on January 6th and use a broad brush to describe everyone in our movement.
No, I didn't mean to do that.
I'm just here to tell you.
It's
not the case. So the people in this movement, the people who rallied behind our cause in 2016 and 2020 are the most God-fearing, law-abiding, patriotic people in this country. And I won't stand for those kind of generalizations because they have no basis in fact.
Yeah, and what I meant was that it has the potential to incite those who were incited on January 6th.
Okay, so she walked that back. What an interesting clip there. All right, so there's a lot to unpack there. Now, Mike Pence is doing the tap dance, man. He is just tiptoeing around all of these issues, just pop, 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 firing off all over the place. And he's trying to thread the line between Trump is very bad for what he's done on January 6th, but not everybody's bad on January 6th, which is true, right? You know, there were a ton of people who got gobbled up in something that they have no part and no business being in, but they did because they're part of a political prosecution, and the government needed to goose their numbers up. And so this is, I think, trying to thread the needle. On the one hand, we saw Mike Pence really hit the recklessness allegation twice in there, and then by contrast, come back at the end of the segment and say and explain that there isn't clarity on what Donald Trump's mindset was. But if he was reckless, and he was recklessly disregarding all of the knowledge, the government is going to consider that to be knowingly, and the knowingly doesn't have to translate to the knowingly that you and I might call knowingly. It's just enough that he disregarded his advisors to meet the mens rea standard. So Mike Pence may have been very useful to Jack Smith in the prosecution, as maybe was Mark Meadows. Apparently, the Washington Post tells us that Mark Meadows was also joking about Trump's election claims. In other words, he was a close advisor who was in communication with Donald Trump, and in their communication with one another, it felt like it wasn't serious, that they were disregarding the claims, and that was reckless conduct. So this might be useful in addition to Mike Pence's narrative. Washington Post tells us Mark Meadows joked about the baseless claim that large numbers of votes had been fraudulently cast by the dead. White House Chief of Staff participated in a phone call in which Trump alleged there were 5,000 dead voters in Georgia and urged Raffensperger to overturn the election. A new text message has been released. Been scrutinized by federal prosecutors. Mark Meadows wrote to a White House lawyer that his son, Atlanta area attorney Blake Meadows, had been probing possible fraud and had found only a handful of possible votes cast in dead voters' names, far short of what Trump alleged. The lawyer teasingly responded that perhaps Meadows' son could locate the thousands of votes that Trump needs. The text was described by multiple people. It was a jocular exchange, not previously reported on, showing that people were openly mocking the election claims, said somebody who spoke on condition of anonymity so that they could leak this to the Washington Post. Special counsel Jack Smith is leading the investigation into Trump and his closer advisors. The text message is a small part of a broader portrait of Meadows that Smith appears to be assembling as he weighs his actions, not only against Trump, but also advisors like Meadows. People close to Meadows have said that he was privately sympathetic to Trump, but Meadows played both sides, they said, often appearing to indulge Trump's desires, according to people familiar with the conversation. Trump is now named the target of a grand jury investigation. A spokesman for Smith is declining to comment. We're asking ourselves, who is going to be a part of this indictment? So we've got some commentary from Jen Psaki and another former government prosecutor discussing the Trump prosecution on the January 6th case that supposedly is coming any minute.
I can't think of anyone better to dig into all of these questions than Neil Katyal. He is a former acting U.S. Solicitor General and an MSNBC legal analyst. I have so many questions, but I want to start just kind of with the timeline of this, because I know you've said there's no reason for a delay, but there's also every reason to think that Trump's legal team will want to delay the process. I mentioned some of them, but what tactics are you going to be watching for that you expect they might try to deploy?
So first of all, Jen, I think that Donald Trump had a really terrible week, not just because of this May 20th scheduling in the stolen documents case, but also receiving that target letter from Jack Smith that you mentioned a moment ago about the January 6th and the days leading up to January 6th potential crimes that Donald Trump committed. So I think the bottom line in the news this week is that it's very likely that Donald Trump is going to be facing 2 more additional indictments from Jack Smith and from Georgia before, say, Barbenheimer leaves the theaters. It's really that severe for him. And with respect to to the timing here, you're absolutely right. May 20th, if it holds, is an appropriate date. It's a date well before the election. It's a date that can accommodate the campaign schedule and the like.
Hilarious.
But Trump is going to try and take every single thing on an appeal. He's going to say, for example, there's the use of classified information, and that procedure violates his constitutional rights.
Right.
He's going to say there's attorney-client evidence that's being introduced into this criminal trial, and that violates his rights and the like. The good thing about our system, though, is it's written so that defendants can't slow down and take what we call interlocutory or immediate appeals to the Court of Appeals or to the U.S. Supreme Court. You got to wait till the end of the trial. So Trump can try, but I think right now, May 20th is a trial date that could and very well should hold.
So he's generally right about that. So Trump can't just start appealing every different ruling. So like let's say Trump says, hey, I need this additional discovery, and the judge says you're not entitled to that discovery. Then Trump could say, well, I want to appeal this. And that would probably not go anywhere on smaller matters like that. But when you have novel, groundbreaking questions like presidential power and constitutional questions of first impression that have never happened before, that are just working their way through their systems, and we've got Classified Information Procedures Act, we've got all sorts of new novel questions of law and fact that are going to be cracked for the first time here. And so there still are opportunities for appeals and for speed bumps in this process, but it is not a default thing that you might see in other places. So Trump could move for an appeal, but it would be on very specific limited grounds, something that is a new novel concept of law. You could ask for permission from both courts to certify this issue for an appeal, saying we cannot move this criminal case forward until we settle this. And if that happens, and in my opinion, it's likely to happen. Now, whether the judge agrees with that is a whole separate issue. But this is a case of first impression. We have never had a former president who, in my opinion, has root Article 2 opinion clause power to all the documents being prosecuted in this fashion. I mean, you might get the Supreme Court that just steps in. Who knows what happens here. But as a general rule, he's right. Trump is not going to be able to appeal every single ruling for most of the minutia. If this were a standard criminal case and there weren't any of these other novel issues, then you would go through to the final endpoint and have an endgame verdict. But this is not the normal case. I know they keep trying to make it into this like this is just a regular, ordinary situation in America. It's not. It's a matter of first impression, and it can really go multiple ways.
That's incredibly helpful, and I was waiting for the Barbenheimer reference we haven't had yet in the show today. I wanted to ask you, I mean, we've all also been in this terrible week for Trump on kind of another version of indictment watch because of that target letter that was sent, but we also learned about a number of high-level witnesses who Jack Smith and his team still want to talk to. What does that all tell you about the timing of a potential indictment? Should we all be kind of pressing refresh, or could it be longer than this week?
Yes, Jen, keep refreshing.
I think we should be pressing refresh. I think it's likely that something will happen this week. So Jack Smith sent this target letter to Donald Trump saying that we're looking at you specifically for the violation of 3 criminal statutes. He doesn't have to do that under the Justice Department rules, but it's very common. And it doesn't mean that he's guaranteeing that there will be an indictment. Sometimes target letters are sent and there's no indictment that's ultimately brought. Here, however, I think that all indications are this is heading to an indictment. You don't send a target letter to a former president unless you're pretty darn sure that you've got the goods. And it does look like that Jack Smith has the goods. There's reports of the fact that Governor Kemp from Georgia has been called before Jack Smith to provide evidence about the fake electors plot. There's suggestions that Mark Meadows, Donald Trump's former chief of staff, may have provided evidence against him to the Jack Smith investigation. And there's, of course, what we all know. We saw for 2 months what Donald Trump did after the November election and all of the different things. And the January 6th committee has uncovered a lot, leading a very respected federal judge, Judge David Carter in California, a federal judge, to say it's more likely than not that Donald Trump committed a series of federal felonies, including 2 of which were named in the Jack Smith target letter.
So in that target letter, it kind of outlines.
All right, so we'll see. I do agree. I think we're going to see an indictment this week. I think it's probably going to drop any minute now. And so when it does drop, of course, we'll go through it. We'll see who the key witnesses are, what the main charges are, what the different allegations are as we continue to cover. And so make sure wherever it is you're watching this, you are subscribed and following as we continue to cover. Now, let's take a look at what's going on in Trump world with expungements. Donald Trump, as we know, has been impeached. The Democrats very excited about that victory. Everywhere we turn, they say, you know, the twice impeached former president. And if that label disappears, what else are they going to have? It's going to be very hard for them. But it may actually become a reality. Is it possible to expunge an impeachment? Well, a couple Congress people are trying, including Elise Stefanik and Marjorie Taylor Greene, 2 House resolutions working their way through Congress. And if the House passes them and Trump does have his impeachments expunged, who's going to argue with the House? As we know, the House can kind of set their own rules and really kind of do whatever they want. The January 6th Select Committee got all of those same benefits. They held fake hearings that were not even in alignment with their own House rules that passed the Select Committee. And so it's kind of a free-for-all in Congress. And if they want to expunge Trump's record, why not? There's a little bit of context here before we take a look at the resolutions. McCarthy and the GOP are now on a collision course, they say, over expunging Donald Trump's impeachment. From the Hill, they tell us that House Republicans increasingly find themselves on a collision course over the battle to expunge Trump's records, a battle that pits the hardline conservatives against the moderates. The promised opposition from centrist Republicans all but ensures the resolution will fail, and it puts McCarthy in a no-win position. But if he doesn't stage the vote, he risks the ire of Trump and his allies. But the measure could be shot down. Latest issue in a long string of debates about the presidential frontrunner. Now, the expungement concept is hardly new. A group of Republicans, including conference chairwoman Elise Stefanik, did introduce a bill that we are going to read. This is designed to erase Trump's impeachments, both of them, from the historical record. Just gone. When Politico reported it, after suggesting publicly that Trump is not the strongest contender, McCarthy raced to make amends with him and in part promised a vote on expungement before the end of September. So this may be coming up. McCarthy has denied that he ever made a promise, but the denial only magnified the issue in the public eye, and it amplified the conservative calls for the Speaker to bring the measure for a vote. It should definitely come to the floor and be expunged, says Byron Donalds. I hope it gets done before August, says Marjorie Taylor Greene. Some Republicans who are moderates don't want it to happen, and many others have vowed to vote against it. Others are communicating with leadership, and we'll see what happens. But McCarthy apparently promised that it would be coming up. And here's what they look like. So Marjorie Taylor Greene's is very short. So we'll start with Elise Stefanik. You can see she signed this, the original signature of the member. And the title of this is Expunging the January 13th, 2021 Impeachment of Trump. So that's the January 6th election impeachment, not the first impeachment for Ukraine. Ms. Stefanik submits the following resolution. She says, expunging the impeachment of Donald John Trump. Says the Constitution provides that the House of Representatives has the sole power of impeachment and that the president is within their power. On January 13th, the House of Representatives, under the votes of Democrats, impeached Donald Trump. 232 voted yes, 197 voted no. Why? Incitement of insurrection. And we'll see if this comes back up again to try to keep him off the ballots. They say Article 1 of the resolution omits any discussion of the circumstances of the impeachment. They didn't include the unusual voting patterns, and they didn't include the anomalies of the 2020 presidential election itself. They wanted him impeached, but they didn't mention any of that. And prior to considering and voting on the impeachment, Democratic leadership back then made no effort to understand the rationale behind the widespread mistrust harbored by American voters in the wake of 2020. Didn't even care. They just wanted Trump gone and removed. They say Trump won 18 of the 19 bellwether counties across the country, and those counties have predicted the winner in every presidential election since 1980. But something flipped. Weird. President Trump received approximately 10 million more votes than in the presidential election of 2016, making Trump the first incumbent president in 132 years since Grover Cleveland's failed bid to have increased his vote from his initial election and seemingly still not won re-election in the subsequent cycle. They say that secretaries of state and state boards of elections across the country changed, and we covered, I can't count how many lawsuits, changed state election laws, sua sponte, which means on their own, voluntarily. They just did it. State election boards, state secretaries of state, they all said, my COVID's everywhere. And they just said, we need to move this, and signatures are waived, and push the ballots back, deadlines back that way, and collect them at the pickup drop boxes, and so on. All in the name of health and safety in the wake of COVID. Public officials in numerous states issued guidance to counties that local election officials were precluded from performing on-the-spot signature analysis, ensuring that absentee ballots could not be rejected because an election official believed that the signatures on the ballot did not match the signature on file. Well, it's close enough for us. 4 Democratic lawmakers, Senator Warren, Klobuchar, Wyden, and a Representative Pocan, formerly enthusiastic proponents of voting machine integrity, went so far as to send a 2019 letter to various voting system companies, providing real examples of voting machine problems, like switching votes, rejecting paper ballots, vulnerabilities to cyber attacks. And yet, those same senators following the 2020 presidential election, any individual who raised the same concerns was dismissed by the Democrats and by pundits in the mainstream media as spreading misinformation and as being nothing more than a conspiracy theorist. Yeah, we lived through that here, man. Whereas the recount efforts following the 2020 election were vociferously opposed by governors and secretaries of states like Arizona, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Georgia. They all said, look good to me. Public officials in key swing states ignored and took great steps to resist calls for accountability and transparency in election administration, and the counting and recounting of ballots in their respective states, further sowing the seeds of doubt in the electorate as to the legitimacy and fairness in the final result. And that rather than setting forth facts and evidence supporting the need to impeach a president a matter of days before he leaves office, and they did that for leverage. They didn't want him to pardon Julian Assange or anybody else. They didn't want the conviction. And so they went around and they said, if you do these things, all these senators are going to convict you. And he didn't. Article 1 of the resolution cites two quotes from President Trump's J6 speech on the ellipse that lack any context, and they're viewed in a light most unfavorable to the president. She says that Article 1 of the resolution that impeached Donald Trump, it grasps at the fact that President Trump stated, we won this election and we won it by a landslide. As well as, if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. As well as undeniable evidence that high crimes and misdemeanors were committed and that the president engaged in insurrection and rebellion against the United States. And they say that the resolution also, the one that impeached Trump, it conveniently fails to mention the fact that Trump explicitly stated, I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol to, there it is, peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard. Why didn't they include that in there? The resolution by the House failed to follow any meaningful legislative process whatsoever. Of course, same with January 6th Select Committee. H.R. 503, when you look it up, it says that it's supposed to have a certain number of members on the body. There weren't. They violated their own rules, they are in control of the House of Representatives, so they can just do whatever they want. Whereas not a single evidentiary hearing on the resolution was held. No witnesses were heard. No process or opportunity to respond were provided to Trump. No members of Congress were provided an opportunity to review or amend the resolution before it came before the full House of Representatives for consideration. And the Committee on Rules in the House is the only committee that published an official committee report in violation of the rules. A majority staff report was released by the Judiciary Committee, but they did not issue a final report. And failing to do this precludes the Judiciary Committee from showcasing their dissenting views. So their process was absconded. They say that to assert that a lone committee report accompanying a procedural rule for a floor consideration provided sufficient due process to Trump and to support that this was justified is contrary to the oath of office taken by every member here. Trump was convicted or impeached without due process. They just crammed it through. Neither the committee report issued by the House Rules Committee nor the text of the impeachment itself contain any mention of the text of Section 3, Article 1 of the Constitution, which provides judgment shall not extend further than removal from office. They say a plain reading of this text says that an official tried and convicted must first occupy office from which he is to be removed and is forever disqualified from holding any office under the United States. Saying that frantically trying to pass this resolution only 2 days after it was introduced in a frenzy of hysteria, House Democrats and 10 House Republicans left the Senate only 1 week to conduct a complete trial and convict President Trump before he left office. So he didn't do anything crazy on the way out. It said it left the Senate virtually no chance to comport with the Constitution, and unsurprisingly, 31 days passed before the Senate held a vote and failed to convict Trump 23 days after he had left office. It was the dumbest timeline. They say further indication of this partisan political motivation behind the resolution Once the articles of impeachment was passed by the House of Representatives and transmitted to the Senate, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court refused to serve the presiding officer for the trial, as required by the Constitution. And instead, the Senate President, Patrick Leahy, a Democrat from Vermont, a partisan politician, he served as the presiding officer over the trial, saying there was nothing more unconstitutional. This is an exercise in futility, it's moot, and it's fantastical political theater. Judge Roberts didn't even sit as required by the Constitution. So in other words, this impeachment is invalid on itself. Although he wasn't impeached, he wasn't convicted. But in the Senate, the trial wasn't even comported properly. So he wasn't convicted in the Senate, but the way they comported the Senate trial was still outside of the constitutional bounds. So they say, all of that being said, all 6 pages of that, all those problems, therefore be it resolved that the January 13th impeachment of Donald Trump is hereby expunged, as if such an article had never passed the House of Representatives, as the facts and circumstances upon which the article was based met the burden of proving neither that President Trump committed high crimes or misdemeanors, nor that he engaged in insurrection or rebellion, such that he is forever precluded from holding office pursuant to the 14th Amendment to the Constitution. And I'm still very curious if the governments throughout this country in various states are going to use this impeachment to stop him from running, to try to keep him off the ballots when they start to generate the ballots during the primary season and the general election. So this is Elise Stefanik's resolution to expunge that and just make it crystal clear that it is no longer on the record, so that if any other states do literally try to keep him off the books, they can't use Congress as a pretext to do it. Now, we'll see if that vote comes up before January. Now, there's another much shorter resolution. This one was entered by Marjorie Taylor Greene, and this one gets the first impeachment, the one from 2019. Hers is short. She says, this one says that President Trump was wrongfully accused of misconduct in a prior House resolution, the one that impeached Donald Trump for high crimes and misdemeanors. But now we have an unclassified FD 1023 document, and therefore, this resolution says that the impeachment of Donald Trump is hereby expunged, as if the articles had never passed the House of Representatives, and that the government did not meet the burden of proving the commission of high crimes and misdemeanors as required under the Constitution. And that's it from Marjorie Taylor Greene. And we saw that Stefanik's gives us some very nice details here about why the underlying impeachment was problematic and why it needs to go. And so now we see the Democrats very upset about this. Nancy Pelosi led these impeachments, and here she is on CNN talking about her reaction to the efforts by Republicans to remove them.
I want to play something that you said just days after the January 6th attack.
Weigh a ton. And if you're Donald Trump talking to these people, they believe it. And they used his words to come here. The crime in some cases was murder. Yeah. And this president is an accessory to that crime because he instigated that insurrection that caused those deaths and this destruction.
Woo! Do you still believe, as you did then, that Donald Trump committed a crime?
First, let me thank you for the opportunity to be here today. Congratulations to you on your 30 years. It seems impossible, but nonetheless, how wonderful. The president is not above the law. I'm afraid what I heard the vice president say earlier, as much as I admire him, and he was a hero that day, Mike Pence was. The president is not above the law. We saw what happened. It was free. It was very clear.
What happened?
It's heartbreaking because
you were waiting for this.
My motto for all these things, and the flag was still there. Being from Baltimore, national anthem written there, and the flag was still there. We always have to make sure that it's about the rule of law and about freedom of speech and all of that. And he has, I mean, the courts will act. He has innocent until proven guilty.
But what does justice look like to you?
No.
Well, justice has to be something that relates to the facts and the law.
When we win,
what are the
justice.
Facts? What is the law? Now make the case.
And we win
I've been
every
through
time.
This so many times in the Congress on ethics cases and the rest
a lot
of that.
of my political
Nothing
enemies.
about rumor, nothing about reputation, nothing about hearsay. The facts and the law.
In a private call, the now Speaker Kevin McCarthy told the former president that he supported the idea of expunging Trump's two impeachments, but apparently he didn't commit to bringing it to the floor for a vote. You oversaw both of those impeachment
What do
proceedings.
you think, Nancy?
What's your reaction to this notion?
Well, the president was impeached because we had no choice.
Because we hate him.
He had undermined our national security, jeopardized our well-being of our country. I was very careful about bringing any impeachment forward. But when the president made that phone call in terms of Ukraine,
he busted
there was
you
no
guys.
choice.
Yeah, he busted
We had
you.
no choice. He must be impeached.
Yeah.
Kevin is, playing politics. It's not even clear if he constitutionally can expunge those things.
Who cares?
If he wants to put his members on the spot, his members in difficult races on the spot, that's a decision he has to make. But this is not responsible. This is not about the flag still being there. This is about being afraid. As I've said before, Donald Trump is the puppeteer. And what does he do all the time but shine the light on the strings? These people look pathetic.
So they don't like it at all. These people look pathetic, man. They really want that impeachment to stick because they worked so hard on it. I mean, they made up a ton of stuff in order to get that first impeachment through. And then they created an entire insurrection to get the second impeachment through. And now these dang Republicans are just going to go and pass a resolution and they're going to undo all of that. Oh, man, they're angry about it. So is stinky Eric Swalwell. Listen to him. He's all fired up, too, over there on MSNBC.
I want to start, before we even get sort of the Trump piece of this and the legal piece of this, by talking about what is happening in your legislative body, because you have Kevin McCarthy moving forward with efforts to expunge both of Trump's impeachments.
Baby.
You were an impeachment manager for Trump's first impeachment trial.
Oh, he'd be mad.
What do you make of that effort? What is it they are trying to do and why?
Wreck America, ruin my life.
Expunging Donald Trump by way of Kevin McCarthy, Alicia, it's weak. It's predictably pathetic from Speaker McCarthy. And when I think about expungement, I think, what are you going to do about that day? Are you going to make it go away? Or are we going to forget that it ever happened? Will it never be taught to our children?
Never.
An expungement is not going to bring back the sight for the officer who lost his eye that day. It's not going to put a finger back on the hand of the officer who lost a finger that day. It's not going to bring Officer Sicknick back to life. It only benefits one person, and that happens to be the person who aimed and inspired the mob to bring the hell and the fury that they brought to January 6th, Donald Trump. Again, it's a weak, pathetic move. It does nothing to change what happened that day, and it will do nothing to stop another January 6th if we were to allow it to happen. So I dare every Republican, especially the 19 in the Biden districts, I dare you to vote to expunge Donald Trump. And by the way, the guy is probably going to get indicted for what he did on January 6th. So it'd be, pretty interesting to see them do that. And the timing would be quite exquisite if that's the route that they want to go.
Young Fang is getting
about those 19 Republicans who are in Biden districts. Do you have any sense that Kevin McCarthy understands the fire that he is playing with, that he understands the position he would be putting members of his own caucus in were he to bring this for a vote on the House floor?
He doesn't, because he's had, the 19 Biden Republicans, vote for the most extreme measures, to deprive women of making decisions about their bodies. He's put up votes, that would hurt our veterans so that we would not end up paying, America's bills and lifting the debt ceiling. And by the way, the government is heading toward a shutdown because the craziest of the MAGA caucus are already saying that we have to shut down the government. And so these 19 Biden Republicans, by the way, many of them in districts that are going to be redrawn because they were the result of, dirty gerrymandering back in 2020, they are squarely in peril, and they've shown every single time that they're going to choose MAGA chaos over the good of the community.
All right, so that is Stinky Eric Swalwell. Very irritated. I mean, I dare you, Kev. I dare you to do it. And we'll see if anything comes from that. But, of course, to round out the impeachment trio, we've got Pencil Neck Adam Schiff, who is saying that McCarthy is once again a puppet of Trump.
Congressman Schiff, as you know, Speaker McCarthy has said he supports expunging Donald Trump's impeachments. What do you make of that prospect, especially as the lead impeachment manager for his first impeachment?
There's no constitutional provision, no constitutional mechanism to do such a thing. It's a farce. That doesn't.
First of all, what is going to be done in terms of enforceability? Are you going to sue to stop it? Because every time anybody challenged your garbage January 6th Select Committee for being illegally constituted, the courts just said, nothing we can do about that. Sorry. It's the House rules. The House governs themselves. If they want to, by their laws, require 13 people to be on a January 6th Select Committee and then only put 9 on there, they're allowed to do that. If it says 8 Democrats, 5 Republicans, but it's only 7 Democrats and 2 Republicans, who cares? We can't do anything about it, says the courts. So if Congress here wants to expunge Trump's records, it's their Congress. What are the courts going to say about it? Nothing. And then Donald Trump can say, got my expungements. Eat it, Adam.
I mean, they won't do it. McCarthy and the Republican leadership in Congress have shown that there is no floor below which they will not sink to debase themselves for Donald Trump. And so we could very well have a vote on it. It will be a meaningless stop to their most flawed, unethical leader. And, Kevin McCarthy probably won't have any problem with that.
All right. So we'll see if it happens. I'll be looking forward to it. It's going to be as valid as anything else they do. They just pass laws and they just say it's constitutional because we said so. And they run the House of Representatives like it's a free-for-all. If the Republicans played even remotely close to their level, they would have already started impeachments, but they don't. And maybe that's why they'll continue to lose. But they're flipped. Donald Trump, we'll see if his impeachments gets expunged. I certainly hope they do. Now, we move on because we've got more business to attend to. And this one is an interesting one. The Biden crime family defense narrative continues to shift. They used to tell us that old Hunter and Joe never had any conversations. During the campaign, there were many, many clips of Joe Biden saying that. No, I never talked to them. It's arm's length distance between us. It's so that we don't develop conflicts of interest. But something interesting happened at the White House. It shifted very rapidly from we never speak, we never talk, I'm not interested or even around my son's affairs, to suddenly shifting into Joe Biden has now never done business with Hunter. And we're saying, wait a minute. Nobody was asking about doing business. We were asking about simple discussions. And so it feels like the goalpost has moved a little bit. I'm waiting for Joe Biden has never got a direct deposit from Hunter. Check his bank records. There's no evidence of a direct deposit from Hunter Biden, whenever that is. That's how far the goalposts have moved. Now, this might be because we know that they did talk about all this stuff, and there are people who are going to testify accordingly. Devon Archer is going to be testifying very soon because the Oversight Committee has demanded it. And so we'll get up to speed on the latest on that, including Hunter Biden going on the offense now and filing ethics complaints against Marjorie Taylor Greene. But let's make sure we see this major shift happening at the White House. From never having spoken with Hunter to now never having done business with Hunter. Watch how fast the narrative shifts. These are several clips from the 2020 campaign. Several of them. You can see Campaign 2020 down there at the bottom. Here's Joe talking about his relationships.
The president's accusation against you stems from your son, Hunter Biden, working on the board of an energy company in Ukraine while you were vice president. Do you agree that that could at least create the appearance of a conflict?
Look, what I agree is with that there's not a single solitary thing anyone said that was done wrong. I don't discuss business with my son.
Don't discuss.
I didn't know that was the case when in fact I found out after the fact. And because I don't discuss things with my son or my family, because I don't want to have any knowledge of any, I don't want to be accused of, well, you talk with your son or you talk with your whomever. And so the fact is, though, everybody's looked at that. He did nothing wrong. Zero. Period.
All right, that's one clip. We also had this one with Ducey over from Fox News. Remember this one? Joe Biden got a little cranky.
I've never spoken to my son about those things.
And so how do you know?
Here's what I know. I know Trump deserves to be investigated. He is violating every basic norm of a president. You should be asking him the question, why is he on the phone with a foreign leader, trying to intimidate a foreign leader, if that's what happened. That appears what happened. You should be looking at Trump. Trump's doing this because he knows I'll beat him like a drum. And he's using the abuse of power and every element of the presidency to try to do something to smear me.
Trump.
Everybody looked at this, and everybody's looked at it and said there's nothing there. Ask the right question.
Yeah, Peter. Yeah, Trump did it, not me. All right, so we have another one. Now, this was here on Today, whatever this show is. And here is a short one of Joe.
Do you think it was wrong for him to take that position?
No.
Knowing that it was really because
$83,000 a month.
that company wanted access to you.
Well, that's not true. You're saying things you do not know what you're talking about.
Oh.
No one said that. Who said that?
Everybody.
Don't you think that it's...
Everybody said that.
Do you think it was wrong for him to take that position?
No.
Knowing that it was really because that company wanted access to you.
Well, that's not true. You're saying things you do not know what you're talking about. No one said that. Who said that?
Don't you think that it's...
Everybody said it, Joe. Everybody's still saying it, Joe. Here's another one.
But he said, quote, Biden and his son are stone cold crooked. Have you talked to your son about any of this?
I talked to my son. We've communicated. He lives out in California.
About what?
We communicated a couple times. But look, there is zero evidence of any assertion being made.
Well, there's a lot of evidence now. I mean, it's starting to come out. We're starting to see it. But this is where he says no talks, no conversations, no discussions. And we've got witnesses who are apparently going to tell us the opposite of that.
Vice President, as you said, your son Hunter today gave an interview, admitted that he made a mistake and showed poor judgment by serving on that board in Ukraine. Did you make a mistake by letting him? You were the point person on Ukraine at the time. If you can answer.
Look, my son's statement speaks for itself. I did my job. I never discussed a single thing with my son about anything having to do with Ukraine. No one has indicated I have. We've always kept everything separate. Even when my son was the Attorney General of the state of Delaware, we never discussed anything. So there'd be no potential conflict. My son made a judgment. I'm proud of the judgment he made. I'm proud of what he had to say.
Bo was the Attorney General out of Delaware, which is another very interesting thing, which is why we suspect that there are no charges coming out of Delaware because they control that state. But the point here, every one of these clips was Joe Biden. I don't talk to my son about it. We don't even talk. We don't even get in the same room. We keep our distance because I don't even want to be asked the question. But watch how the language shifts from the White House today. Very careful language. And as she reads from this, watch her reading very carefully so she gets it right.
Chairman James Comer today says that the Oversight Committee, has evidence that the president in the past communicated directly with foreign business associates of his son Hunter Biden many times. Curious if the White House and the president still stand behind his comment that he's never been involved and has never even spoken to his son about his.
So I've been asked this question a million times. The answer is not going to change. The answer remains the same. The president was never in business with his son. I just don't have anything else to add.
Oh man, you heard that one. Never in business. Give me a break. So those goalposts moved pretty quickly, didn't they? From never even spoken to him. He works in Ukraine? You're kidding me. That's amazing. My son's over in Ukraine now. What a grown-up boy. He had no idea. Now they were never in business. Why? Because of course they were meeting and talking and emailing and going to dinners and hobnobbing around different galas, going golfing together. So but there was never what does this mean? A formal business contract? They didn't form LLCs together. And by the way, this is also nonsense garbage also, because Hunter sent an email when he was hanging out or transacting with CEFC, the business in China that was doing the energy work. Hunter was facilitating with them and said, I need keys made before he got paid his $5 million super chat from the CCP. That went into his bank account. He sends a letter over to the faculty at the new office, and he says, I need keys for me, China, and my daddy, before they went out snorting coke or whatever with his hookers. So I think they were in business together. They had keys to the same office. But what are they going to default to now? There's no formal LLC document signing, like Joe Biden's not a member manager of Hunter Crackhead Co. Yeah, we're not expecting that, Karine. There's no official documentation that they incorporated as an S corp with Hunter. No, we know that. Yeah, we know. But the goalposts continue to shift. These people are so dishonest.
Chairman James Comer today says that the Oversight Committee, has evidence that the president in the past communicated directly with foreign business associates of his son Hunter Biden many times. Curious if the White House and the president still stand behind his comment that he's never been involved and has never even spoken to his son about his business.
So I've been asked this question a million times. The answer is not going to change. The answer remains the same. The president was never in business with his son. I just don't have anything else to add. Okay.
Yeah, the other layer here is we're also not sure that they were in a business either at all. We don't really know what the business was. We just know Hunter Biden was getting paid millions of dollars for unknown reasons with no real skill sets. $1 million a month for Burisma. So it's not actually business. Would you also answer the same question? Joe Biden was never in a criminal enterprise with Hunter? Just replace the word business with criminal enterprise. We're not saying it was a legitimate business either. We think it was a quid pro quo exploiting American influence for financial gain. So that's a whole nother layer that they're lying about as well. Now, the reason why this shift is coming out hard, and a lot of people are catching it, is because Devon Archer is set to testify. Devon Archer is a business executive that used to hang out with Hunty and Daddy VP. And apparently, at least 24 phone calls between Vice President Joe on the phone with business associates 24 times. Ex-partner Devon Archer scheduled to testify. Here's a Hunter Biden text message. $10 million per annum budget to use further in the interest of the junior partners. This move to $5 million is completely new to me, not acceptable. I can make $5 million in salary at any law firm in America, which is really, that's a nice salary, man. Not because of his legal skills, okay? Just to be clear on that. He's not filing great motions to dismiss or something. It's daddy related. If you think it's about money, it's not. The Bidens are the best I know at doing exactly what the chairman wants from this partnership. Now, according to Devon Archer, he's expected to testify to Congress not this week, but the next. The first son's former best friend, and he's apparently going to say that Hunter would dial in his father, call daddy. Archer is facing jail. He created a $60 billion bond fraud, scheduled to testify before the House Oversight Committee. That meetings that he witnessed that were attended by Joe Biden, the vice president, either in person or via speakerphone, when Hunter would call his father and introduce him to foreign business partners and prospective investors. Now, I know that there's a lot of probably individuals in the mainstream media who would say, well, this is from the New York Post. Where are they getting their sources? And just as a reminder, this has been the most accurate media enterprise of all of them on Hunter Biden stuff since the very beginning, since 2019 with Bob Ulinsky, all the way up through the laptop. They were silenced and censored. And so, as far as we can tell, there is nobody more accurate than the New York Post reporting. And so Comer says, we're very much looking forward to hearing from Devon Archer. One such meeting apparently took place in Dubai late the evening, Friday, December 2015, when Joe is VP. Took place after a board meeting with Burisma, which was paying Hunter $83,000 a month. Archer, who is also a director on the board, is expected to testify that after dinner with the Burisma board at the Burj Al Arab Hotel, he and Hunter traveled 6 miles north to the Four Seasons Resort in Dubai. They wanted to have a drink with one of Hunter's friends. While they were sitting outside a bar, Vadim Poharsky, a senior Burisma executive, phoned to ask where they were because Burisma's owner, Mykola Zlochevsky, needed to speak with Hunter urgently. Soon afterward, 2 Ukrainians joined Hunter and Archer at the Four Seasons, and they said, "Can you ring your dad? Can you get your daddy on the phone?" At the time, it was early afternoon Friday. Hunter then called his father, put him on speaker, placed the phone on the table, and introduced the Ukrainians to Joe Biden by name. He said, "Hey, Dad, I want you to meet Nikolai and Vadim." He also said the words to the effect of, "These are Burisma bigwigs that need our support." Biden greeted the Ukrainians, but spoke only in vague pleasantries during the short call. Of course, Joe Biden's not going to do anything right there. This is just a show of force. This is just, hey, I told you I'll get my vice president daddy on the phone. Daddy's on the phone. And in other such interactions with Hunter's overseas business partners, Archer is expected to testify. And they're expected to probe the reasons for the urgent phone call request, among other things. They'll note the context. 3 days after the speaker phone call, Vice President, who was then with Obama, that was the point man on Ukraine, he was going to fly to Kyiv to address the Ukrainian parliament, speaking to them about corruption. 10 weeks before the phone call, the U.S. Ambassador Pyat had given a speech about corruption, and by then, Viktor Shokin, the Ukrainian prosecutor, was already investigating Burisma. Within 2 months, he seized 4 houses, bunch of Rolls Royces belonging to Zlochevsky. He was living in exile over in Dubai. A month later, Biden gets involved, threatens the $1 billion. Joe Biden gets Shokin fired. Boom. Quid pro quo. And he said that. We've played the clip here multiple times. So now this guy is expected to testify about other meetings, another speakerphone meeting, including a restaurant in Paris where Hunter whipped out his phone, at least it was his phone this time, crying out loud, and put his father on speaker to impress prospective investors. Did this little party trick over and over again. Did it as many as 24 times in Archer's presence. The Long Island-born father of 3 is expected to tell congressional investigators under oath. I'm also aware of other Biden family business associates confirming that Joe would take phone calls from Hunter in the middle of business meetings and would weigh in via the speakerphone, says Bob Ulinsky. All these people really close to him just continue to tell us. There's all this evidence. Sitting with Hunter at Chateau Marmont before I met Joe in May 2017, Hunter was adamant his father takes his calls anytime, no matter what his lawyers say. And we don't even appreciate the extent of this corruption. So apparently they're going to be meeting. Catherine Herridge over from CBS, who's also been a great source on this, posted an X on the X and says that a GOP oversight spokesperson confirmed CBS News a transcribed interview with Devon Archer scheduled for Monday, July 31st. As a former business partner, Archer provides a firsthand account of Hunter's business deals and involvement of family members. And so all of that is coming soon, which is why the White House is shifting their narrative from, no, they never spoke about this stuff, to suddenly, no, we never did any business together. But Hunter is not just sitting down. He knows he controls huge swaths of the government right now through his daddy. And so his lawyers are striking back. In fact, they filed an ethics complaint against Marjorie Taylor Greene for those very naughty Hunter photos that Hunter, let's see if any of these are on this article here. Looks like we're in the clear. But apparently Hunter and his lawyers are complaining against Marjorie Taylor Greene because she held up that image of him doing things, which of course we were not expecting to see in Congress. But the ethics complaint was filed by her lawyer, Hunter's lawyer. Biden attorney Abe David Lowell slammed Marjorie Taylor Greene's actions. I tried to get my hands on the physical letter and I couldn't find it. But this lawyer calls it abhorrent behavior that blatantly violates House ethical rules and standards of official conduct. It says this week, your colleague has lowered herself, and by extension, the entire House of Representatives, to a new level of abhorrent behavior that blatantly violates the ethical rules and standards of official conduct. If the Office of Ethics takes its responsibilities seriously, it will promptly and decisively condemn and discipline Marjorie for her actions. Now more than ever, the House has a duty to make loud and clear that it does not endorse or agree with her pictures of Hunter's wee-wee in Congress. And, they say that she should be disciplined. And, it's just a free-for-all in Congress right now. So, all right. Well, we'll see if they do anything about it. I fully expect Marjorie Taylor Greene to come back with bigger pictures, which we will avoid. But the lies are being exposed. The Biden White House is continuing to shift the narrative. And I expect it to continue as they continue to cover up. And now, my friends, we have a fun interview with one of the Biden crime family whistleblowers. We remember this fella. Biden crime family IRS whistleblower Joseph Ziegler shows up on CNN in the lion's den to combat the standard narrative. And we've played many clips from CNN and other mainstream media sources saying that these whistleblowers are not credible, that Gary Shapley and Joseph Ziegler, who happens to be a Democrat, by the way, are lacking in authenticity, that they are corrupted in some way, shape, or form, and that they're not reliable. Even though we've gone through Shapley's record, we've gone through Ziegler's record, we know that they were on the investigatory team specifically looking into Hunter Biden and the Biden crime family, and they've got a firsthand account of all of the discrepancies that have been shared with us as Americans. Merrick Garland told us that David Weiss, who was the U.S. attorney leading the prosecution, had full authority. But David Weiss says maybe not. And these whistleblowers say absolutely not. And so while CNN wants us to believe one thing, the whistleblower, Mr. Ziegler, is now showing up here on CNN, and he's taking it to Jake Tapper. And it's enjoyable. Here it is.
IRS Special Agent Joseph Ziegler joins us now. Thanks so much for being here. We appreciate it. Let me start with just the big picture here. What is your main allegation you're making about this investigation into Hunter Biden?
Well, I wanted to thank you so much for having me on your show. I think it's important that your audience hears essentially what I presented, facts, yesterday in my testimony.
Right.
So my main allegation is the equitable treatment of taxpayers. We have to treat every taxpayer the same in investigating our cases with Department of Justice. And I think that's important, that everyone understands that to have a fair justice system, we need to treat people the same. It doesn't matter what your political beliefs are. It doesn't matter how much money you have. Everyone should be treated the same.
Right, and the suggestion is that Hunter Biden was given special treatment and the U.S. attorney did not proceed as aggressively as he would have had Hunter Biden been someone else. So David Weiss, as you know, the U.S. attorney, said in a letter to Judiciary Committee Chairman Jim Jordan, quote, "I have been granted ultimate authority over this matter, including responsibility for deciding where, when, and whether to file charges." I read that earlier. It wasn't just in this letter. He said it in multiple letters. Do you think he's not telling the truth?
So it's not, I don't know his intentions with what he stated there, but what I can tell you is the facts. I know, based on conversations I had with assigned prosecutors, that he went to the Washington, D.C. U.S. Attorney's Office, bringing the case there. They told him no. He had to...
He wanted to charge Hunter Biden here in D.C., you mean?
So he wanted to bring the case there in D.C. to charge for the 2014 and 2015 tax years. They told him no. And I think it's important that in his letter, he said that his authority is geographically restricted to the District of Delaware. And if he needs to go outside of that, he needs to ask to partner with these other U.S. attorneys' offices. And if they say no, then he needs to ask for that special attorney authority. And he was assured that.
The special counsel authority.
No, he says special attorney authority. And I think it's important that you understand that They haven't turned over a document that says, here's the letter where we gave him the special attorney authority. And all we're trying to do is say that if this were anyone else, if this were Joe taxpayer, he would be getting a much different treatment than what was at place here.
And he knows that because he's been investigating Joe taxpayer for years. So is Gary Shapley, some of the most experienced people ever, actually. And Shapley, who was, I think, his superior in some ways, was the lead on teams investigating multi-level, multinational criminal syndicates. And so they know very, very well what the ramifications are for other types of crimes that are in the same wheelhouse as Hunter Biden's were. And let's get back
Well,
to
you're
the
saying
story.
that there would be other charges in other jurisdictions. Is that what I'm taking from this?
Right. So they told us that Joe Biden kept David Weiss, who was a Trump-appointed U.S. attorney, and that somehow legitimized this entire investigation because it was a Trump-appointed U.S. attorney. The problem with that, though, is that when he went over to D.C. to file charges in D.C., the D.C. attorney, which was appointed by Joe Biden, said no. So a Trump-appointed attorney who has to get permission to do anything from a Joe Biden-appointed attorney is really kind of like a Joe Biden-appointed attorney because he has no authority outside of the confines of the Biden safety net.
So the prosecutors assigned to this case,
because he was charged. I mean, he did have a plea agreement, and he is going to go before a judge. I mean, it's not like he's not facing anything.
Yeah, a misdemeanor
I'm not
and a
excusing
diverted
it, but
felony.
I'm just saying there are these allegations, and he is going to face a courtroom proceeding, et cetera.
So the four assigned prosecutors of the case agreed with recommending felony and misdemeanor tax charges for Hunter Biden. David Weiss also agreed with that, and I know that from a meeting that I had with him in late August, early September. And on top of that, you have David Weiss essentially, so they all agreed to charging the felony and misdemeanor. So DOJ policy on this is that their tax policy is that if you have a felony with a misdemeanor, you have to charge the felony, and that's to prevent inequitable treatment of taxpayers.
And they didn't do that, is what you're saying.
And according to the charging document, they only charged 2 misdemeanors, and one of those tax years related to 2018.
So let me just
absolutely,
give you an opportunity.
which is amazing. So, it's oftentimes from a public perspective, it's hard to get a prosecutor's policies. So you might go into, attorneys will generally get them because we deal with prosecutors so much, or you deal with judges so much. If you go into a judge and say, hey, what's your policy on DUI sentencings? Do you include the day, or what do you do? They might tell you, well, I look at every case in front of me, uniquely and all this stuff. But you know exactly what the policies are. And internally, they've got policies. This is how we handle prostitution cases. This is how we handle first offense DUIs versus second offense DUIs. First offense, whatever. And here, he's giving us an inside look, peering into what their policies were. All right, if you got a felony and a misdemeanor, the felony's got to stick. They didn't do that in this case. They reversed it. In other words, the misdemeanors are sticking and the felony is being diverted away. It's a literal flip. And it's also on minor charges, much less significant than the other charges, because the other 2014 and 2015 cases, they were delayed so far that the statute of limitations just were allowed to expire, and they fell off. It's amazing.
Needed to respond to some of the things that Democrats on Capitol Hill are saying. First of all, they're saying, why would a Trump-appointed U.S. attorney, David Weiss, lie?
So I have no idea what his motives or what his beliefs are. All I can do is present the facts to Congress, and it's for them to determine, and the American people and the administration to make the proper decision on how to move forward.
Because he's a DOJ lifer. He lives in Delaware. He's in Delaware. He's got the entire Biden apparatus up his butt, along with all the Democrats. And there's a lot of pressure to bear on somebody like that who's been there their entire lives. They keep using Trump appointed as though it's like this escape out of jail card. That exonerates everything. Well, he's Trump appointed. Oh, okay. He still has the entire Department of Justice, FBI, IRS, Merrick Garland, the power of the White House breathing down upon his neck to come to a certain conclusion. That doesn't mean anything to you?
So let me ask you another question. So you're a 13-year veteran of the IRS, is that correct?
I am.
Okay. Is this the most
pretty good
high-profile, most potentially politically sensitive case you've ever worked on?
Yeah, I would say so.
And when you say that you saw abnormalities in this case, like what other cases are you comparing it to? Just the normal Joe taxpayer case?
So I'm actually working an even bigger case than this. Not as sensitive as this, but an even bigger case than this. And I can tell you the assigned prosecutors in that case have not acted anywhere near what we were going through, being constantly hamstrung, not following normal process. The storage unit location that we wanted to do the search warrant on. I think that it's important for people to understand that we had a plan to move forward. Even David Weiss agreed with that plan, but then they were at the same time telling defense counsel that we know about this storage unit and that you need to turn over the records. So we were relying on him and his counsel to turn over those records to the government versus us going and getting those records.
So
yeah, this guy's just totally out of, one of these things is just not like the others. Prosecutors are generally get the phones, get this, get his wife, get his ex-wife, get his kids, get his mother, get his father. Oh, he's dead. Get him anyway. I don't care. And they want it all. But in this case, it's like, well, are we sure it's his storage thing? Is there anything in there that we really need? Does he know that we're searching it? Oh, he doesn't know that we're searching it? Well, let me tell him. And he says, that doesn't feel exactly right here, Jake.
You testified yesterday you wanted to interview President Biden's grandchildren, Hunter's grown children, right? They're adults. But you were told, no, you couldn't. Even without those interviews, you still had enough evidence, in your view, to recommend charges because he was deducting things related to them that he wouldn't be allowed to deduct in his taxes, right? I mean, so you already knew the crime had happened. The argument would be, you don't need to talk to Hunter's adult children. You already have the evidence that what he did was wrong. So tell me why that's not a satisfactory answer.
So when we work our tax cases and it's an expense.
You already had enough evidence. You don't need to talk to everybody, right? Which is amazing because what is Jack Smith doing? I'm pretty sure he scraped through Mar-a-Lago like with a cheese grater to get all the evidence out of that entire facility, because that's what prosecutors normally do. And if this were the same energy being pointed towards Joe Biden, this would have felt very different as well.
That is deducted as a business expense on someone's tax return. You have to essentially, they're presumed that that's a business expense until you prove that it's not. So part of it is going to the third party to get those records. That's one step. And then interviewing that person to determine why was that expense made. And then a lot of times those witnesses could lead you to other things. They could lead you to other evidence, expenditures that might have been made related to them.
So obviously it's a politically sensitive case, and I don't disagree with you that theoretically everybody should be treated equally before the law in investigations like this. One question I have is, and because we hear Democrats saying this, that you and Shapley have not produced any evidence of criminality by President Biden. Is that, when they say that, is that correct?
So what I can tell you and what we stated yesterday, we are working with the House Ways and Means. We are
to get President Biden's taxes?
No, we are working with the House Ways and Means to any records that Congress has asked for related to this investigation. We are working through the process. They can vote on whether or not to release those to the full Congress. And that's the process that is a part of being a whistleblower.
So this was cited, and you were called before the committee because they're talking about, the House Republicans are saying that the federal government has been weaponized against conservatives and Republicans. They give any number of examples of there being very aggressive treatment of Republicans, and in their view, in their characterization,
Trump gets prosecuted, Hillary doesn't. Right.
You are a self-described Democrat. You worked at the IRS for 13 years. Is that an accurate description based on what you've witnessed in those 13 years?
So I'm not going to speak to the weaponization of the government because I don't think that's appropriate for me. I'm just going to present the facts as I know them. I think one of the big things that I mentioned yesterday was we need to have an independent attorney with authority to come in here and see and make sure that things were done correctly to the law. And I think it's important that there may be ancillary offshoot cases from this that are sensitive that need to be investigated appropriately that may not have venue in Delaware, so we don't run into that same exact problem. And that's all I'm trying to say, is that we need to have someone in there to look at that.
All right, so very interesting conversation there with Joseph Ziegler, Jake Tapper, and I think he has great answers for every one of Tapper's questions. And he's very careful not to speak too much or out of pocket. Says, I'm working with the House Ways and Means Committee, giving them the information they need. They'll be the people who determine where this goes. One of the people that is on one of those committees is Jim Jordan. And he, of course, is on the Judiciary Committee, as is James Comer. And we've got clips from both of those gentlemen here.
And we begin this Sunday morning.
People are going to watch this hearing very closely.
Yeah.
It's going to be televised, and hopefully, they will get a better understanding for the level of criminality that the First Family has participated in over the past decade.
So those hearings are coming up, and of course, we'll hit the highlights on those. We had Shapley and Ziegler testify, and now we've got Jim Jordan, who's going to be giving us an update on what the Judiciary Committee is up to.
Yeah, I do think if you step back, there's sort of three fundamental questions here, Maria. The first one is, what were the Bidens doing to get the money? I mean, 20 different shell companies, 9 different Bidens getting paid. What was the service? What was the product? What was the value they had? The only logical explanation here is it was access to then Vice President Biden, maybe even before that, Senator Biden. The second key question is, was he really involved? Was it this Hunter Biden's operation, or was Joe Biden involved? It sure looks now like he was, based on this confidential human source and the information we got in the 1023 form, thanks to Senator Grassley. And now I think we're at the important final stage of this whole thing, which is, who are you going to believe? The two whistleblowers whose testimony has been consistent, or the Garland-Biden Justice Department, which can't get their story straight? David Weiss has said 3 different things over the last month and a half about how he handled this investigation, what authority he had. The whistleblowers have been true, consistent, and their testimony has not wavered. So I think now that's the important phase. And frankly, that's the phase, that's the part that the Judiciary Committee is really going to examine, because David Weiss, Maria, said on June 7th in a letter to me, he said, I have full authority to determine where, when, and whether to file charges. And then 23 days later, he wrote me another letter. He said, I stand by what I wrote, but to clarify, but I want to add to it, he said, I actually don't have full authority. My authority is limited to his U.S. Attorney's District. Well, which is it? You can't have full authority and then say you're limited. Yeah. And then just a few weeks later, he wrote Senator Graham and changed his story yet again. And I think that is the key, and that's what we're going to be looking into.
Well, what does AG Merrick Garland have to say about all of this? Did Merrick Garland perjure himself by telling you he didn't get involved here?
Great question, because what's so interesting is when I first wrote the Attorney General clear back in February asking about the special counsel, whether there should be a special counsel for the Hunter Biden investigation, he doesn't write me back. He doesn't answer. And they always give you a response. He doesn't answer. I write him again, the Attorney General. Again, he doesn't respond, but guess who does? David Weiss, the U.S. Attorney in Delaware, who's supposedly handling this case. That in and of itself is unusual. So the Attorney General has been pretty quiet, other than what he testified to, which is David Weiss has full authority, but now David Weiss tells us he doesn't. And more importantly, Gary Shapley and Ziegler both told us that all through this investigation, the investigators and the prosecutors were on the same page. And then something happens near the end of 2022, October of 2022, it all changes. And that's this now famous meeting where David Weiss tells Mr. Shapley and others of the investigative team, he says, I don't have full authority. I asked for special counsel status. Main Justice wouldn't give it to me. That is the key distinction. He asked for it and he was denied, is what Mr. Shapley says. Mr. Garland says, no, he had full authority. He could have had a special counsel if that's what he really wanted. Those are the two different stories. We got to find out who's telling the truth. My gut tells me it's the two whistleblowers.
Well,
yeah, I think I agree with that totally. But there's a debate about special counsel now that's also taking place. And we got to be careful. There's a distinction between special counsel and special attorney and who can do what. And the question, of course, is also, do we want a special counsel? It would be somebody appointed by the Biden administration through Merrick Garland, right? They would appoint somebody who is supposedly fair and independent, but that would give them a full opportunity to drag this thing out years, and who knows how long it would take. And they could then button it all up in a nice little force field of a special counsel investigation that could take who knows how long. And if that's compromised, well, you get nothing.
This is a question for the full conference, but I will tell you this. The Speaker has been very clear. Speaker McCarthy said, if we have to go to an impeachment inquiry, we will in fact do that. It sure looks now, based on all this evidence that keeps piling up, based on what Senator Grassley released this week with the 1023 form, what we heard from the whistleblowers this past week, and the conflicting statements from the Justice Department, it sure looks like we're moving in that direction at a pretty quick pace. But ultimately, Maria, that's a question for the full conference, Republican conference in the House of Representatives. We will do what the Constitution requires if that's where we need to go, but we have to figure that all out. One thing I do know is if you head down this road, it completely consumes Congress. As you know, I was on the other side of this when Democrats did their ridiculous impeachment of President Trump 4 years ago, and the amount of time and focus it just demands from the Congress is huge. But if that's where we need to go, because that's what the facts say, and that's what our constitutional duty is, then we will, of course, move in that direction.
And sounds like he might be a little bit skeptical on bringing those impeachment charges because it really does gobble up a lot of the bandwidth throughout Congress. But we'll see if there's enough there to incentivize them to correct this, or do they just want this to continue forward? We've got another, year and a half of the DOJ doing whatever the heck they want. If Congress doesn't act to impeach Garland or impeach Wray, free reign for 2 additional years. And Byron Donald says that's not acceptable. Both of these people knew what they were doing. They covered it up years ago. FBI and the IRS should have repercussions for both of them.
What is pretty clear now is that Hunter Biden was the facilitator for Jim Biden and Joe Biden. He was the one that was pulling all this money in. Everybody in the Biden family is either getting direct payments or their living expenses and their luxuriation is being covered by Hunter Biden or by one of these companies. And then the last piece of this is that the FBI knew about this. They were getting information from their confidential human source. IRS, the International Tax Fraud Department, where Mr. Shapley and Mr. Ziegler work, they were investigating this. And somewhere in Maine justice, they were slow walking these investigations, stonewalling these investigations, letting the statute of limitations run out on these investigations. And in my mind, that is clearly obstruction of justice from the Department of Justice.
Yeah, FBI, DOJ, they just break the rules. They spy on judges and senators. They make up fake stories. They warn defense attorneys about search raids of storage facilities if they're favored defendants. What's it going to take for Congress to do something about it? We'll see. But the IRS whistleblower is bringing more to light, and we'll see if Congress takes any action any day soon as we continue to cover. Thank you, my friends, for subscribing wherever it is you're watching this, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the next one. All right, my friends. Well, that is it for us on the day. We covered some good ground. We got the IRS whistleblower and Jake Tapper. We got some updates on the Biden lies and his 24 phone calls with apparently Hunter's business partners and the big narrative shift that's taking place. We also have Democrats flipping out over Trump and the possibility that his impeachment is expunged. We read through Elise Stefanik's resolution in the House, and we got some updates on Mike Pence and this new concept of recklessness, that maybe that is the mens rea. It's not about intentionality that leads to Trump's insurrectionary behavior. It's just recklessness, which is a much lower standard. We'll see if that shows up in the indictment. But now, my friends, it's time to hear from you and to see what you have to say over from our friends on Locals, on YouTube, on Rumble. Thank you for going over to robertgovea.com, signing up to get access to this mind map. If you want to access this mind map and anything that we talked about, all the video clips, all the PDFs, literally this exact mind map you're looking at here. We also added a new calendar here. So we're going to be keeping tabs of some of the upcoming hearings. We've got Devon Archer testimony coming up next week. And then this week, we've got our UFO hearing, which is scheduled for Wednesday. So we're going to start keeping tabs on this on the mind map calendar. You can access the mind map calendar. Go on over to robertgovea.com and sign up for our daily newsletter. Also, if you want to read instead of watch, if you'd rather just read something instead of watch something, when you're at robertgovea.com, click on this reports tab up here, and you'll get all the reports from the show. So you can see here, police prepare for Big Fanny for her RICO case. So here's robertgovea.com. We got a full article here. And you can share this article with your friends and family and, spread the good love. So robertgovea.com to check that out. Now, let's say hello to you, my friends, and see who is in the house on this beautiful, lovely day. And we've got Dolphin Fan is the man bringing in 5 new membos to get us started. Don't mind me here. James Pepper, Raul Ramirez, Just Cause got an invite, and Eddie Clay. All membos. Thank you to Dolphin Fan is the man in the house. We also had Don't Mind Me says, thanks, Dolphin Fan is the man. Don't mind me. Been a member for 2 months. Thank you, Dolphin Fan is the man indeed. We got FMF Doc says, for Rob, needs a new haircut fund. Doesn't like the do? Well, all right. I'll think about it. FMF Doc. Maybe you want me to buzz it? Or should I grow it long like Hercules or something? 2012 Jameson says the Federalist Papers has insurrection in it. I think everything has insurrection in it now these days. FMF Doc says $5 for the ponytail fund. Blah, ha, 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 ha. So maybe that'll be from my, when I go through my spiritual phase. Yeah. When I want to be like one with the universe. I'll wear a headband and grow my hair out. We got Curtis Bartles in the house, says, thanks for being you. And thank you, Curtis, for being you. And look at this happy little pair playing ping pong. Is that with a pair? Hopefully he's not playing ping pong with a pair. That would be like cannibalism or something. All right. Scorpid Black Dragon says Pence reckless words are not reckless actions. Yeah, that's a fair defense. He was just saying things, but those things couldn't have led to any action. Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see, but I think that's the mental state that they're going to be looking for. Zulu's here. What's up, Zulu? Thank you, Zulu, for this. Says, I've been hearing for nearly 2 years from chat constitutionalists that Trump wasn't impeached in the first place. Why? Why would anyone want to expunge something that didn't happen? It's baffling. Well, just to make sure that it really didn't happen, obviously. Just to make sure. Oh, like 1,000%. I'm trying to think of a good example of when you've done this. It's like sometimes you want to be really, really sure. You know what I'm saying? Really sure. So you just expunge it, even if you don't need to. What's a good analogy? Like a cleaning analogy or something? Sometimes it's better to be safe than sorry. I can't think of a good one, but you've got one. But it's a good, I see your point. Zulu's saying, well, if he wasn't impeached, then why are you trying to to expunge it? I get it. Good to see you, Zulu. Thanks for the super chat. A Bad Poet says, the impeachments are important, but should be renamed. The politically biased false impeachment 1 and 2. I like that. You should send that to Trump. He can put that in his list. Russia hoax 1, Ukraine, Russia hoax 2, biased false impeachment 1, Ukraine, biased false impeachment hoax 2. I like it. You should send it over to him. Pickle Jars for Hillary says, funny how all these measures only benefited the Democrats. It's usually how those things work. Rocky Water, what's up, Rocky? Says, happy Monday, Rob. Here's to a wonderful week. Appreciate what you do. Thanks, Rocky. Happy Monday to you, my friend. And hopefully you're having a beautiful week too. It's a fresh new week. We're going to close out, July this week? I think Monday is the end of the month. 1 week from today. Closing it out. Thank you for being here. We got Patrick Parker for 10 months. That's a baby and then some. Says, Rob, what happened to conservative punishment? You mean like conservatives being punished by the liberals, or conservatives doing any punishment like in the forms of political punishment? Well, I think the conservatives, at least some of the Republicans in Congress, I think they enjoy being punished by the Democrats. You'd have to talk to them about it. Strange behavior. Michael Allen Hughes says, Trump being expunged will change nothing with the MSM. It won't probably, but it will, well, what it would do, I think it would change them to go, rather from them saying twice impeached, they would say the twice impeached but questionably exonerated former president or something like that. Like they'd have to insert something in there. The illegally exonerated, twice impeached president. That's a good one. The illegally exonerated, twice impeached president. I think that's probably what they would go with. I don't know how they would get around it, but it would be fun because then we all could sit here and say, you know, Adam Schiff got censured, but Donald Trump has never been impeached. Never. Not one time. Not once. It's been expunged. I like it. Salty Sarge says, Nancy said, don't worry about the evidence. She filmed it all, and it's in post. Lots on the cutting floor. Well, she was the one who said, I've been waiting for this to happen. I've been waiting for this. A bad poet says, Pelosi sounds like she is confusing presidents. Well, she kind of sounds like she's just confused a lot in general. Good morning. Sunday morning. CD's in the house. As a supporter, welcome, CD. Hopefully we see you tomorrow for our members-only morning stream. Let's Go Brandon has been a member for 2 months. Says 2 whole months. This guy right here is the real summer of love, guys and gals. It's true, baby. Let's Go Brandon in the house. 2 months, summer of love, my friend. I'm glad you're joining us. Let's Go Brandon. It's been a beautiful summer indeed. It's been hot. Salty Sarge says, I know none of Hunter's contracts will not have Joe's signatures on it, but it will have his fingerprints all over the paperwork. I don't think we're going to see any official paperwork on this stuff, but they're moving money around. Like, I don't think Joe Biden's going to be listed as a member manager on an LLC formation form. I don't expect that to happen. But doesn't mean he wasn't getting enriched. 1R5 says, never say that a rigged election is rigged. You could get into a lot of trouble. You could, especially on YouTube. Well, that's the old rule. They've loosened up on that a little bit. But that's our friend on Rumble, 1R5. Shout out to our Rumble friends. Thank you for that. Very nice one, 1R5. We've got Fred Padamonte says, everybody's looked at this. Who's everybody? I think he means his family. Everybody in his family. My wife asked him, okay, and Hallie asked him too. And James, my brother, also talked to Hunter. Everything's fine. Oh, okay, good. Thanks, Fred. Salty says, I don't know where Devon Archer is, but whatever room he's in, it has an air of foreboding. Yes, indeed. Keep our good energies going out for Devon Archer this week. Hopefully he's wrapped in bubble wrap somewhere, locked in a safe. Ned Frankly, been a member for 7 months. Fix background play on members only vids, please. That's a YouTube request there, Ned. Let's all send that to YouTube together on 3. YouTube, fix background play for members. 1, 2, 3. All right, hopefully they receive that and do it. Jackie Carrion says, Rob, here's $5 to help you towards what you do legitimately, to help you towards your first legitimate business that you do yourself. This is some BS from Jackie Carrion. Here's $5 to help you towards what you do legitimately, to help you towards your first legitimate business that you do yourself. This is some BS. Well, $5 is pretty good. I think I'm going to raise my fee to $83,000 a month for my legitimate business, doing whatever I legitimately do. Thank you, Jackie. Woods Precision Arms is in the house, and Woods sent me a very nice email with a nice article on it. Very good article. Says, Rob, do you think that Hunter was so mad at Marjorie Taylor Greene because of the really big naked pictures of him that she displayed, or the really small black parts covering up his privates? Inquiring minds, Robert. Inquiring minds. Oh, that's a good question. It's like she could blow him up bigger, but it's not going to do anything, Hunter. It's not going to do anything, bro. There's no amount of zoom enhance that's going to help, all right? Just do whatever you do. Just stay out of our American tax dollars and country's business. We got Southern Comfort says, thanks for sharing such valuable information along with breaking down the legal jumble. Thank you, Southern Comfort. Thanks for being here. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for always contributing and for being so amazing. And I appreciate that. We're having some fun here. I'm glad you're joining us. Draw Williams is a supporter in the house. Thank you, Draw. Welcome aboard. Okay, we had a couple other ones. FMF Doc is here. Shared some. FMF Doc says, Twitter is censoring conservatives, challenging rhinos. Twitter is challenging conservatives, censoring rhinos. We have another one from Donut Mind Me. Says, expungement means striking records, but neither chamber may ex post facto purge entries in its CODIS AI Section 5 mandated journal. Short of unconstitutionally altering the House journal, expungement has no valid legal effect. From Daniel Henry. Purge entries in its... That's interesting. No valid legal effect. Well, I guess the point is, does impeachment have much... So does the current status of the impeachment have much effect other than being a label? I don't think so. So if there's just a response that he has also been expunged, it's just another entry, as far as I can tell. So that's kind of my point. It's like, who cares? It's still a new label, and he can say it means whatever they want it to mean. I guess is my point. I think probably you're technically right. Like, you can't go back. Like, he's never going to... This is kind of the same thing in criminal law, generally. So just as a general criminal concept, in a lot of states, you might have expungement, right? But you're still not going to be able to delete all of the internet records of your arrest and your charge, because it's everywhere. So like, yeah, it can be expunged and you no longer have a conviction, like technically, but it still is out there and everybody kind of can look it up and see it if it's out there. So it's kind of just, in some states, it's a feel-good new label. And I think that is really what this is, which is why I think it's kind of interesting that they might do it. But I understand your point. This one from Daniel Henry says, official nonsense has no upside and potentially serious precedential downside. The House expunging an impeachment already tried by the Senate is precisely that kind of nonsense and ought to be avoided on principle. Well, I think generally I would agree with you on that, Daniel. But in my view of what's happening right now, the Democrats are the ones engaging in nonsense, and they keep getting away with it. So if the Republicans don't engage in the same nonsense, then they're just playing with a smaller set. They've got less tools. And so if they don't engage in the nonsense, the Democrats will nonsense them to death. And I agree. I think it's a downside. I think it's a problem. I would have liked, for example, the January 6th Select Committee to host a no-nonsense hearing that was in comportment with H.R. 503, but it wasn't. And so we got a joke sham thing over there. And I've been saying this for years now, that the Republicans are going to do the same thing. And it's going to be hard to say they shouldn't, because the Democrats started it first. So when the Republicans win, whenever that is, they had better prosecute criminally whoever the Democratic lead nominee is for the next nomination. Like, I'm sorry to say that, but that's where this is going now. If they're going to prosecute the Republicans are going to prosecute the Democrats. And this is late stage democracy, right? This is the same thing that we've been talking about for a long time in terms of the fourth turning, in terms of, well, there's many different concepts of this, but how a society is devolving into the political prosecutions, and it's now manifesting itself in Congress. I think it's a problematic thing. I'm not in favor of it, but I think that it is just the reality, unfortunately, that we're living in. Unfortunately. Hey, K Bean says, shout out to Donut Mind Me for clipping the chats. And yes, shout out to Donut Mind Me. And I see John Allen's also clipping away over on locals. Thank you, John Allen. And K Bean, thank you for K Bean for shouting out Donut Mind Me and John Allen. We got this one from Crash to Contrary. Says, Rob Sunlight is better than Clorox. Rob, sunlight is better than Clorox. Ergo, the FISA judge earlier today, we talked about this on our members-only stream this morning, says we need to allow FISA to move forward if Ray and his compatriots lose immunity, and when the janitor screws up, they hold Ray accountable. If, I see, they lose immunity. Right. I agree. That would bring in some very nice incentives. It would disincentivize the bad behavior. When we read through the opinion this morning on our member stream about the FISA court ruling, I don't think there's going to be any repercussions for those people almost at all. So what really disincentivizes that behavior? Nothing. Wims is here. What's up, Wims? Says, if we're going to make it right, we really got to make it right. If Trump was anyone else, he'd be compensated by the district. From Wims in the house over on Locals. Good to see you. Well, somebody's going to, it's going to be messy until there is I think a resorting, a reconsolidation. We might see, a separation, a partition at some point. Who knows? A Bad Poet says, I tried to see how many protesters on J6 story idea. I tried to see how many protesters on J6 a story idea. Good one from A Bad Poet. Bonnie says, Rob, I want to see you with a bushy beard with a long hair riding a Harley. Yeah, maybe at another phase in my life. Yeah, maybe that will come up one day. Yeah, I've tried to grow out my facial hair a little bit. It kind of grows in weird. It's kind of like a little patchy, I think. I got really thick hair too. It's just kind of thick, I don't know. We'll see. Maybe once I go through my second divorce or something. All right, Joe says, my name is Joe. What's up, Joe? Welcome. Thanks for the super chat. Steel Stargazer says, did you hear the gaffe Pelosi made about Joe Kennedy instead of Robert Jr.? No, I didn't. Was it a Chappaquiddick thing or an Obama-quiddick thing? I don't know. Woodchip Bill says, two things. Who is the unknown Biden? And, there's many of them. Hallie was in it. James was in it. There were others. And second, as far as special counsel is concerned, we can just look at the Biden classified documents, special counsel. Well, right. And they're spending, I think, what they've spent like $500,000 over 5 months. It's like $1 million a month for Trump's prosecution, $100,000 a month for the Biden prosecution, and a very different set of affairs there. Beyond Geostars says, I'm verified on X now, baby. Love you, brother. ZAGREA 44, verified on X. We'll go say hello to X in a minute. All right, so there's a new haircut fund. Jigam has this suggestion. How about this hairdo, Rob? I don't know. I think it looks good on you. All right, you ready? There it is. What do you think? What do you think about it? Where'd it go? Let me get it back on the screen. Scared it off the screen. Where the heck did it go? There it is. Fabulous. Yeah. Thank you, Jigam. That's when I go into my Fifth Element phase. I think that's when I hang out with Bruce Willis on that spaceship. Yeah. Hey, Don't Be Hating says, Rob is the king of sofas and demand. Thank you, Don't Be Hating. We had another one come in from this one from FMF Doc. Says, Rob wants to be like me, a king beard ponytail riding a Harley like this guy. FMF Doc. It's a good look, man. It's a good look. It looks good. I don't know that I could pull it off. You look like a cool person. I don't know that I could do it, but it looks pretty cool. All right, we've got that. Those are from our amazing friends. Thank you, everybody, for sending those in on Rumble, on Twitter, on X is where we're going right now. We're going over to X right now. On Rumble, on YouTube, on Locals. Who's watching on X? We've got 7 viewers. Woo, woo. Oh, 6. Somebody left. Sorry about that. Somebody's like, no, this isn't that good. Rob's coming back over here. They left. We're down to 6 now. All right. Well, don't anybody else leave. All right. All right. So this is what we've got here. Fred says the Trump trial will never take place in May. Mark my words. I think that's probably true. Fred says, come on, guys, 21,000 on Twitter? We can get robbed to 50 from Johnny. Well, thank you for that, Fred. Yeah, I got to start posting more on Twitter. It's time. I have to grow up a little bit. Danny McWilliams says they all talk like lawyers, talking for hours and saying nothing. Thanks, Danny. TJ King says, if you remember in the 90s when the blue dress proved guilt, the Dems knew Slick's impeachment was coming. DeFi and others recommended censure as a substitute. If so, precedent is Andrew Jackson, and he had his censure expunged. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, so I don't know what the full details are on it, but it will be interesting. I mean, if they do it, they can do it anyways, and the actual legal consequences are, whatever they are. Trump will go out and say, they've been expunged. That's all you want, is just to give him that opportunity. So he can just say it every time. It will be very irritating to the other side. They'll hate it. All right, Matthew Reese is here. Says, am I the only person who is sick of hearing Pence? The way he doubles down on the overturn the stuff is nonsense. You can't overturn fraud. Good to see you, Matthew. Phil Reno says, old Joe Bidey poo sure gets angry and combative every time he gets called out by reporters. They call Trump a bully, but this guy gets in their faces when he doesn't like the questions, no doubt. Zena Xavier says a $5 million super chat. Yeah, priceless. Yeah, I mean, it's nice, man. Like, is Burisma giving out super chats? Hey, Burisma, if you're out there, drop me a $5 million super chat, all right? I'll answer your question really good, all right? Like, really well, whatever you want. We'll spend a couple minutes on it. Just send it over, all right? So those are our friends on Twitter. And my friends, thank you for all of those amazing questions and the amazing conversation all across the fruited plain. Now, we are going over to our members only after party located at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. Or if you join us as a member on YouTube, you can also, don't forget to grab the Telegram link. It's a private link in the community section on YouTube. Join us on Telegram because we're not done quite yet. We're having our members only after party, which is where we'll chat for a little bit longer. But don't forget, before you get out of here, go on over to robertgovea.com. You can sign up for a newsletter that you'll get delivered to your inbox every day, detailing the show notes. You can also read the summations and the reports of the various topics that we cover, all at robertgovea.com. We also want to remind you, head on over to fieldofgreens.com, load up with your nutrition, and save 15% off with code Robert when you check out. Big thanks to the mods and the meme smiths who help keep this show nice and orderly and on track. Big friends and shout outs to Donut Mind Me. Thanks for clipping today. Dog Digger, Janek 909, our friend John Allen, also clipping away for us. Zach Nichols, Beyond Geostars, our friend Zulu, Ronnie Cole, Playing Hooky, Just Cause, K-Bean, and our friend Vienticus Prime, who keeps things nice and orderly. Shout out to our meme smiths. You saw my new hairdo, courtesy of our friend Geegum Geegum. Shout out to Nathan N810 and Sleepy Dog Lee, Paul Mino, our meme smiths. But that, my friends, is it for us on this beautiful, beautiful Monday. I want to thank you for joining us as we covered all of this news. We've got UFO hearings on Wednesday. We've got Devon Archer 1 week from today, but this week is going to be busy, I'm sure of it. And so thank you for subscribing. Thank you for liking this wherever you're watching it. Thanks for inviting a friend or family member over here or forwarding them an email from the new newsletter so they can come and join us as we attend to all of this business and more. But that is it for us on this day. We will be back tomorrow to do it all again, and I hope to see you right back here so that together with your help, we can shine that big, beautiful spotlight of accountability and transparency down upon our system with the hope of finding justice. Make it a beautiful night, my friends. Sleep very well. I'll see you right back here tomorrow. Bye-bye.